Yes, sir, you're live.
Okay, we'll call the Senate Minerals Committee meeting to order. And the first order of business is House Bill 105, Severance Tax Reduction, coal. And, we need to take roll call too. Might as well do roll call.
Senator Beitman? Senator Cooper?
Excused.
Senator Rothfuss?
Here.
Senator Wasserberger?
Excused.
And Chairman Anderson.
Excused.
Thank you.
Adjourned.
There comes Senator Cooper. All right, now we'll get going on House Bill 105. And we have a presenter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to the committee. I present House Bill 105 to you for your consideration and request your favorable consideration of the bill. I started with this bill with the degree of fairness between the 7% severance tax that applies to coal and the 6% that applies to oil and gas. And I thought that that was an unfair amount. The amount that amounts to about $250 million more taxes for coal in the last decade versus the 6% that they would pay if that was oil and gas. So it costs them $250 million more in the last decade for that amount of tax. The next issue on that, I think, is the amount of money that coal pays towards the state. It pays $292 million in tax total to the state. Of that, about $150 million is severance tax, and $150 million is ad valorem tax, sales tax, and property tax, ad valorem property tax. So with those items, you can see that they are a very significant contributor to the state's economy. And the amount of tax that they pay with this 7% severance tax, I think, is enough that it would be better for our economy if it was lowered down towards equality with oil and gas. The reason for that is the coal companies are in trouble right now, and they have been for a number of years, and they're probably going to continue to be in trouble for a number of years in view of the way that the administration looks at coal in our economy. I think you can look at the coal industry kind of as the little engine that thought it could when it started going across country. It hauled a coal. Had a car behind it, in which they hauled their taxes, $292 million that they paid in 2021. They did okay. Just ran along just fine. But then we have the administration raising barriers to coal, raising the cost of items to them. Right, this Build Back Better bill had an item in it that would have raised the severance tax on coal from federal land by $2 a ton. Now that would be greater than the amount of tax that we charge now here in the state. So you can see that put a barrier, and the coal company that was just trying to go over that hill, chugging up the hill, and it would, if you could take a little bit of the weight off of that back car, that 0.5% sales tax, I think it'd have a better chance of making it and providing that $250 million to the state, or $290 million to the state. So I think that the issue is one of equity to the coal companies in regards to the way that they get charged their tax. And I think that it only amounts to about $9 million, this 0.5% sales tax reduction. And that is a small amount compared to the amount of tax that they pay. which is $292 million a year. That's about 3% tax cut. And it's something that the state, I believe, could afford right now. It has enough money in its, and this money does not go to the schools. This money goes into the general fund, this $9 million. So with that in mind, Mr. Chairman, I recommend that you all would support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hallinan. Any questions for Mr. Hallinan? Any questions? Any questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Mr. Hallinan, for being here. Thank you for presenting your bill. Any other public, any agency discussion of this bill? Any agencies that like to discuss the bill? Any public comment for the bill? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Christopher Knapp, representative from Campbell County. And just to reiterate, just some comments, it does level the playing field. Coal is one of those that is highly taxed and both from a severance aspect and ad valorem at 100% property tax. AML funds, which are taxed as the coal goes right down the rail there at 1 ton, is taxed at 10% or 12 cents a ton, whichever's higher. This would also ensure Wyoming's position as a blended energy producer. The governor's vision of Wyoming, instead of shipping commodities down the road, shipping energy down the road, I think that is one important piece to that puzzle. As we do wind, solar, nuclear, it becomes a great piece of that puzzle to re-energize that industry. It also provides the energy to ramp up production in a time of crisis. So we've seen across the nation as coal's been needed to fill that gap for natural gas. It gives that ability to ramp up the people that they had to let go, which was thousands of Wyoming jobs. It allows them to rehire, retrain, and keep moving. So that is my testimony today, if there's any questions.
Questions for Representative Knapp?
Mr. Chairman.
Yes. Senator Rothfuss.
Thank you. Representative, the last point is actually kind of a point of concern I had, was the idea of where these funds would go if this tax relief were given. And your suggestion is that they would ramp up and rehire. I wouldn't anticipate that, and I would actually share have a very different view of how the funds would be used. Do you have any conversations or any economic analysis or anything that would suggest that if there were a decrease in their taxes by $10 million, that they would hire back Wyoming or increase production in Wyoming?
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Knapp.
thank you, Senator. I do. The history of the industry itself bears that out. There's always dips and valleys in production, and they do have that time where they have to either. These employees have given up benefits. These employees have given up their jobs. They've been furloughed, and as things come back, as prices increase or production increases, the mining companies always have to fill that production. And they have to do that by rehiring, sometimes in many cases retraining, because those individuals have left the state. So this portion of this tax would not only level the playing field with other mineral industries and oil and gas, but it would also give them that ability to have that little bit of extra money to give a benefit back or to rehire a position, which they have to do in order to ramp up that production.
Mr. Chairman, a quick
Yeah,
follow-up on
follow-up.
that. And my apologies for not asking Representative Hallinan a similar question. I probably should have. And the suggestion, though, that this would somehow lead to a ramp up. Ramp up is the demand is based on the market demand, and we've seen an increase in the market demand in recent months, independent of this legislation. And we've seen an increase in the commodity price, again, because the demand has gone up. Supply-demand curve is pretty clear. Why would this have any effect on any of that? I just don't see how this would. And again, I've had countless conversations with energy economists on similar topics of, how much effect does incremental change in taxes have, and typically you have to get pretty significant before you get to the point where anything really changes in terms of supply, demand, production, or anything along those lines. So why would you see, or what evidence is there? Has there been any modeling to suggest that a $10 million change in the revenue aggregate across the state would have any significant impact on employment?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I don't imply that this tax will somehow raise the demand for coal or raise that level that you're looking for. What I'm saying is, in any business, I own a small business, if I were relieved of some of my taxes, I can afford to give employee raises. I can afford to rehire where we need to. And it allows a business to grow. There's been some talk of the money going to shareholders or going out of Wyoming. And I would say that stock price is based on the outlook, many other reasons than a drop in taxation. It's based on the outlook of the industry. So this tax, number one, utmost of anything, levels the playing field. That's the biggest concern. I think Representative Hallinan represented that very well. We have a disparity in the tax itself, and I understand that this industry and minerals in general have helped to build Wyoming. It's helped to build our schools. It's helped to build the entire state. And as these other industries come on with wind and solar, I think that it's time to say, okay, you've done what you were intended to do. Let's give this industry a little bit of break as these other ones come on, so that we can have a blended style energy coming out of Wyoming, and coal will continue to be a part of that.
Thank you.
Other questions for Representative Knapp? Other questions? Thank you, Representative Knapp. I'm sorry, are there any other legislators in the room that'd like to speak on the bill? I'd like to recognize Representative Sweeney and
Henderson's back there.
Heiner is back there.
Oh, there's Heiner, Burkhart.
Burkhart, yes. A multitude of them. They're all interested in this bill.
The chairman recognizes all of them.
Well, recognize every one of them, yeah. Okay, anybody else to speak on House Bill 105?
Mr. Chairman, Rusty Bell, Campbell County Commissioner. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thanks. I stand in support of this, representing Campbell County Commissioners. The vast majority of these surface coal mines are in our county, and it's a tough market. Senator Rothfuss has talked about, and I think everybody knows it's a tough market. While this bill doesn't direct that money to any certain place, keeping it in the county, or any of that kind of stuff, what it does is gives those companies a chance, and a little bit more of a chance to use those dollars. Some of them are hiring right now. There's a little bit of a bump in the market. And they are offering incentives. That makes their margins go down even lower. And so, our hope is that this makes all those surface mines more viable for a longer time. Really, I'm just here in support of our industries that are happening there, and any help that we can give them right now. I certainly have to be in support of that.
Questions for Commissioner Bell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Bell, thank you for being here. Have you had any conversations where any of the companies that would be affected by this have committed to you that they would hire back more employees or increase production?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, not specifically that they're going to, but they actually are hiring back now. I mean, if you're sitting at a stoplight in Gillette right now, watching the digital billboard, every other billboard is hiring a coal miner in almost every mine. And so I didn't have to specifically ask that because it's, I mean, it is there. They are doing that. And some of the other things that are happening, there's some road moves that are happening that are uncovering, some of that reserve, and those are expensive, more expensive than they used to be. Inflation hurts that industry also when they're paying diesel fuel prices now, and they're using, they're using a lot of diesel fuel. I have a lot of confidence that a lot of those dollars that they're going to see back from this are actually going to be used in operations. There's nothing in this bill that specifically says that, but ultimately, it seems like that would make sense.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Follow up on that, but Commissioner Bell, I think you just indicated that hiring, again, it's based on supply demand, it's based on, and the price is based on supply demand. So the hiring is going on without this legislation, and my concern is this is effectively a $10 million appropriation direct to the coal industry. That's what this is. We can look at it any way we want, and I appreciate the fact that equity is a concern, but at the end of the day, it's a $10 million appropriation to the coal industry. Usually when we appropriate money, we have expectations of an ROI. And what I'm looking for as we contemplate this, there was a suggestion that this would increase the ROI. I don't see how it can when you look at the market for coal in particular. The only companies capable of producing coal at the price that our Powder River Basin coal producers produce them are right there in the Powder River Basin. Nobody else is even in the ballpark of the price. And it's really the rail cost that ends up being the dominant factor in the delivered cost. So I struggle when I look at this from an economic standpoint to ever understand how small changes in the price do anything in that constrained market, which is dominated by the transportation costs. So can you give me any more confidence that this would have a positive effect either on industry or the state? I do see that, $10 million will go somewhere, but if it's not going to jobs for Wyoming employees and it's not helping the state in some way, I'm struggling. Do you have anything else?
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner.
Senator Rothfuss, not sure I'm the best person to answer that rate of return, but I have probably don't have a very good answer for that. Ultimately, I think this tax incentive or this tax break is, in equity is going to go back into the operations that are happening, whether it's so that they can upgrade some of the equipment that they've had to, I don't want to say limp along, but there's been a lot of maintenance going on, not a lot of buying of new equipment. Some of those things, I think, although it doesn't say that in this bill, I realize that. I truly do believe that those dollars are going to go back into the community and the state in some nature. Thank you.
It's really important to repair that equipment and replace it. Yeah. Mr. Wasserberger, Senator Wasserberger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the thing that we're forgetting is that as we have mined coal in Campbell County, the coal seam continues to go deeper. We all know that. And with the coal seam going deeper, you have higher production costs. And as a result of that, the mine companies themselves need a little help. And so in order to deal with production costs, a coal mine truck, massive truck, costs $10 million. They're horribly. And they pay sales tax on them.
Oh, good bargain.
Yeah, it's a bargain. It's got air conditioning too. And all the bells and whistles.
Electric windows?
Yeah, but I don't get that. But still, my point is that their costs go up just like everybody else's. And so as we see the seam going deeper, it costs them more to produce that coal.
Mr. Chairman, follow up on that?
Yes, Senator Rothfuss, go ahead.
The concern I've had, and honestly this is for quite a few years, is that you have you have coal companies in the same circumstance or nearly the same circumstance competing with one another, each of which has an incredible supply capacity that takes a while to ramp up. But each of them could very significantly ramp up that supply capacity in a relatively short period of time. And each of them wants to compete with the others in the same neighborhood for the same market, for the same spot price, or for contracts. And they're all working on razor-thin margins because they have to compete with each other, not with the rest of the national market. So we're talking about giving them an advantage, but all we see when they have a tiny little additional advantage that's uniform across them is they just consume that, lower the price slightly, and get rolled in the marketplace. So this is yet another one of those. If we had something which actually provided them with legitimate competition in the market so that they could be selling coal nationally and competing with other producers around the country, if we gave them an advantage that produced that, that's great. I would love to see that. I'd love to see increased production. I'd love to see more revenue and better prices. But that's not what we see, and I don't see how this does anything but lead to a very short-term arms race where they all try and save an additional $10 million, and then they're competing with each other once again to see who can give the thinnest of margins. That assumes that the demand is continuing to be high. When the demand's high, we don't need this, and everyone's golden. So that's my response to the good senator.
We are doing things to help the coal market. What they need is more sales, and the market that they're selling into has a problem. They have carbon dioxide they need to get rid of. We're trying to bring that back to Wyoming and sequester it. We're trying to explore carbon capture throughout all of our industries, not just the coal mining, but the industrial guys too. So we are doing things to help their market, and that's what they need, is more market. So Wyoming isn't doing nothing for the coal industry. Any other questions for Commissioner Bell? Other questions for Commissioner Bell? Thank you, Commissioner Bell. Anyone else from the public like to speak on this riveting subject?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. It's always a pleasure to visit with you, and this is a great topic, and we've already had some pretty good discussion on it. My name is Travis Deti. I'm the Executive Director of the Wyoming Mining Association, and we stand in support of the bill. Surprise, surprise. And we bring we thank the bringer of the bill. This is something that we've talked about for several years. Now is the right time. You'll be hard pressed to find an industry in this country operating under the current tax burden that the Wyoming coal operates under every day. And when I say that tax burden, I say it broadly because that includes taxes, royalties, and fees. And you've heard me go through my laundry list, and I'll go through it again if you would have just indulged me. In addition to the state severance tax, we also pay ad valorem on production, ad valorem on property, state sales and use tax, state rents and royalties, federal mineral royalties, federal mineral bonus payments, AML fees, and black lung fees. Black lung fees, incidentally, in 2020, $100 million, that's money that actually goes out of the state because we don't see any of that coming back because we don't have a black lung issue, but we pay the lion's share into the black lung trust fund. My numbers are a little bit older than Representative Hallinan's because I haven't compiled mine yet for 2021, but 2022, total taxes, royalties, and fees, the industry paid $830.5 million. The total for Wyoming that year?
Mr. Deti, they paid that in 2022?
2020, I'm sorry, Mr.
Yeah,
Chairman,
okay.
yes, 2020.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Of that, $555 million, $0.9 million came back to the state of Wyoming. That number used to be double. There were years not too long ago where $1.2, $1.3 billion coming back to the state every year. State's getting a very fair return on our coal mining. Times have changed. And when we look at kind of what we're facing, we're gonna have a couple good years. The unanticipated uptick in demand in the latter part of the third and fourth quarter of last year. And when I say unanticipated, because I'd like to kind of get to one of Senator Rothfuss's questions. We had to ramp up to meet that demand. And one of the things that we had to do in order to do it, and going on now, is hire people. And given the state of, nationally, of trying to get people back to work, it costs more to hire people. They're having to, raise wage packages. One company offering a $5,000 signing bonus just to get people back to work. It's harder to get people back to work, and it costs more to get people back to work. And the main thing I think when we talk about this, a severance tax reduction from 7 to 6.5 would improve competitiveness by moving us closer to parity with natural gas, which is currently taxed at 6%. And fundamentally, the benefit of reducing the tax would make more competitive against other fuels and generation options. And this comes from our companies and from the utilities when natural gas prices are low, which they've been. They're high now. They will not stay low. They will not stay high. Natural gas is volatile, and it will continue to be even more volatile. But when those prices are low, an incremental 50 cents can make the difference between when a coal plant dispatches and when it does not. That's a utility decision. So it is about competitiveness. We believe this will help Wyoming coal operations to reinvest in infrastructure. Times have been very lean, and they will continue to be lean. Again, looking at the broader picture that everyone knows, utilities are not building new coal plants, and they are prematurely retiring operating ones. So the customer base remains the same. That's not going to change unless we do crack the carbon capture nut and go there. But that's what it looks like right now. And it's been lean for these operators for the last several years. So we believe that this will allow for our operations to reinvest in their infrastructure, to purchase equipment and supplies, to implement reclamation management, and to maintain that workforce that costs more to maintain. So there was this debate, and I think Senator Rothfuss kind of hit on this earlier, this idea that it's going to be $9 million leaving the state. It's going to be ledgered somewhere in a headquarters in another state as profit. But I'd like to note that a ledger has an expenses column as well. And expenses and operation costs have risen across the board for all Wyoming coal mines under the current inflationary pressure. One operator told me just this morning that operating costs are up roughly 10% in this quarter alone and rising. And some examples that I penciled out, just some back of the napkin examples. The cost of one haul truck tire, roughly $30,000 per tire for a 240-ton haul truck. Roughly $50,000 per tire for a 400-ton haul truck. Now, these are expected to increase this year, and they're planning on this increase to $40,000 and $60,000 respectively. These tires are replaced on an average of 7,500 hours or 15 months. And a larger PRB coal operator currently runs about 90 haul trucks, about 50 240-ton haul trucks, about 40 400-ton haul trucks. So currently the cost of a 400-ton haul truck tire, one truck to run it for 15 months, to replace that, it's $6 million for one truck, 4 tires, one truck, every 15 months. For a 400-ton, $8 million to replace 4 tires every 15 months. That's the cost of the tire. And that doesn't include the cost of the equipment service company that's putting the tire on. So just consider the cost of the tires. If those increases that they are projecting come into play, it moves to an $8 million every 15 months for a 200-ton haul truck, $9.6 million. So when you look at that and back of the napkin math, that is $3.6 million, a $3.6 million increase for one operator in the Powder River Basin to buy haul truck tires for 15 months. $3.6 million over 15 months. We're talking about $9 million coming out of the state total. This is going to be total for all operators. That's just just kind of an example of some of the cost increases that are coming along. And diesel prices. Commissioner Bell noted diesel prices. According to EIA in their report that came out yesterday, their weekly report, diesel prices are up over 90% from a year ago. And diesel is stuff that operators have to pay for to keep operating daily, but it also impacts their bonding costs as the agency recalculates the bond. So it's not the inflationary pressure and the the cost increases. The daily operating costs are going up, and bonding costs are going up.
Question? Questions, just,
Interrupt Mr.
Mr.
Detail
Detail?
to point out something that he was speaking to specifically during his talk, and that is the coal mines pay tax on diesel fuel. That diesel truck never touches asphalt in the state of Wyoming, ever. Mr. Chairman, that's right. So those are just a
agree?
couple of examples of how costs are increasing. So, a reduction will help operators mitigate these costs, and they'll be mitigated in Wyoming. So when we talk about $9 million, whether it's going to go off and whether it's going to pay debt or pay a shareholder, but that money's going to be spent in Wyoming, whether it's purchasing fabricated parts in Gillette, whether it's a haul truck bed out of Mills, or whether it's various services from around the state, whether they be environmental consultants and reclamation specialists in Sheridan, in Casper, in Laramie. That money is going to be spent in the state. And I think the idea that it's just going to go out of the state and sit on some ledger and go somewhere else, I just don't think that holds water. Another example, the bills for Gillette College, which an institution the industry fully supports, is going to be its own college now. Those bills are going to come due pretty soon. And the coal industry is going to be picking up the lion's share of those. And we're happy to do that. But the costs are going up. And so the idea that any savings that a company would realize would leave Wyoming, it just doesn't hold water. And the industry will continue to invest in the state as it has for over 50 years. And I want to talk just a quick bit about spot prices because that's come up in the debate too. The spot prices right now, they're higher than usual. It's a blip and they're falling. A couple of months ago, they were over $30. They've already dropped $10. Spot price as of yesterday was down to $21.65. The week before, $23. As the companies ramp up and start hiring, as the railroads hire, and are able to meet that demand, the spot price is going to fall. And I do have to note that right now, very little coal is being sold on that spot market because the available coal in the Powder River Basin has largely been contracted for 2022 and 23. And that's a good thing. And I think when you talk about the spot price at 30 bucks, whatever it ramped up to late December, early January, I'm sure that price maybe helped influence some contract prices, but I think it's fair to say that a lot of those contracts are probably in the traditional range, maybe a little bit higher than the $12, $50, 50-cent range. So allowing companies to have more capital in their coffers as a result of this will help the industry take advantage of current market cycle that is currently very strong. But it's temporary. It is temporary. And we're all aware of the federal efforts to hamstring the industry and its customers in the utility sector. And we believe this federal pressure is going to continue while the president's Build Back Better plan has apparently stalled, failed, whatever. We remain concerned that efforts to revive parts of it will either come legislatively or administratively. And, specifically the Build Back Better plan, it included the $2 per ton severance fee, a new one on federal coal. Based on 2020 production of 218.6 million tons, that would have been an added burden of $437 million to the industry. The other things, an increase in acreage rental rates from $2 to $100, that's an increase of 90% or 98%. These things are stalled. Thanks to our work from our congressional delegation and one senator from West Virginia, that stuff is kind of on the back burner right now, thankfully. But Politics at the national level in this country are a little screwy right now, and we're seeing pendulum swings. 8 months is an eternity in politics. Maybe different folks will hold the levers of power coming down the line, but we remain concerned about this stuff. So the point being that these proposals were not only discussed in Washington, D.C., but were included in the president's signature legislation that they tried to get through. So, there is this ongoing concerted effort to keep our coal on the ground at the federal level. And we don't expect the administration to ease pressure on coal just because their plan failed legislatively for the time being. As everyone in this room knows, the Department of Interior is conducting their full-scale review of the BLM federal coal leasing program as part of President Biden's executive order. And we believe it is fully reasonable to expect that the administration will attempt to use the study to raise royalty rates. 50% is expected. And we ask where we get that number. Well, it's been proposed in Congress, in legislation in Congress in the last 2 years. And, based on, again, 2020 tonnage and average price, my back of the napkin math, an extra $88 million in cost to coal companies. And with higher production projected for 2022, that number will be even higher. So any one of these provisions being successfully implemented could cause serious harm to Wyoming's coal industry and the ability to produce the mineral, making it uneconomical to mine. And this would immediately negatively impact the revenue generation for the state, as well as challenge the industry's ability to create and maintain our good-paying jobs. So we believe a severance tax reduction will provide some breathing room and cash flow that will allow for better long-term mine planning and investment in the state. Every dollar saved will help the Wyoming coal industry withstand ongoing pressure from Washington that we know will not stop until at earliest 2025. Now, during this legislature is the prime opportunity for the Wyoming legislature to allow for companies to save more money, increase competitiveness, cover rising production costs, help stabilize cash flow, and limit exposure to an increasingly different capital market for coal. The current 7% severance tax in Wyoming on Wyoming surface coal is one of the highest, if not the highest in the nation. And the reduction proposed in House Bill 105 would be a move in the right direction to right-size the tax burden for the industry to help meet the current realities. So we ask for the committee to approve this measure and send it to the full Senate for consideration. And I would note, just as a final aside, that there has been discussion of somehow trying to tying this severance tax reduction to the assigned trust program. We would respectfully ask that this be avoided. As this committee knows, you passed an excellent bill for the assigned trust, but that covers not only coal, but also trona, bentonite, and uranium, and any effort to give the coal industry tie it as a 5% reduction in the severance tax as an incentive to participate in that program. I don't think that would pass muster. So with that, Mr. Chairman, my mouth is getting dry. I've talked a lot, and I would be happy to answer questions from Senator Rothfuss.
We're going to block him just because you said that. Yeah.
If that's possible.
Anybody else have questions for the speaker? Anybody else? Anybody else? No? You got off.
Am I going to get off that easy on this topic?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
You
members of
covered
the
it
committee.
all.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And again, we would urge you to pass this bill and keep it moving. So thank you very much.
Quick comment.
Just a comment, not a question.
I should have quit while I was
I just
ahead.
want to note that your consecutive streak on supporting tax reductions is unbroken.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Senator Rothfuss. I look to keep it that way.
Thank you. Next up.
Mr. Chairman, David Bush with Black Hills Energy, also representing Wyodak Resources. Hard to follow that little comedy hour there, but I'll do my best. So we, Wyodak Resources is our mine, serves our mine mouth operation for our coal-fired power plants in Campbell County. We do about 4 million tons a year, put it on a conveyor, run it under the interstate and burn it. So we are in support of the bill. I don't want to take up too much time because I know most of these people are not here to hear about this bill. But but would ask that you support this bill and for all the reasons that have been mentioned by the commissioner and the Mining Association and the representatives up in that area as well.
I was just trying to make sure he didn't have any questions for you.
I'm sure he wants to talk about deregulated industrial power zones again.
Is there any questions for Mr. Bush? Any questions for Mr. Bush, please? Hearing none, thank you, Mr. Bush, for your testimony.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Anyone else? Anyone else?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ashley Herbstreit, Wyoming Taxpayers Association. Wyoming Taxpayers Association advocates for public policies that make sense for a healthy Wyoming economy. Since 1937, the WTA has provided the essential connection with and has been the information source for the state taxpayers and policymakers. We are committed to promoting a strong, sustainable fiscal policy for the future of the state of Wyoming. By doing this, we use the cornerstones of taxation, exemption justification analysis, and tax criteria matrix as we develop those to guide policymakers as they protect taxpayers from excessive government spending. Influenced by historic efforts of the association, WTA will continue to educate with concise and updated information for our members and public policymakers, specifically regarding how their tax dollars are being spent. The executive and legislative branches have recognized that the state's tax structure is in a permanent state of imbalance. The two branches largely supported the work of Tax Reform 2000 Committee in implementing many findings and recommendations. Based on this belief and the cornerstones of taxation, Mr. Chairman, we support House Bill 105, Severance Tax Reduction (COLE), as it is sound tax policy for these reasons. The tax reduction is justified as the state has $1 billion in surplus of federal funding and potentially could have $1.764 billion in the LISRA per the Craig post-session. Per previous testimony, the industry's total tax burden for the state of Wyoming in 2020 was $555.9 million, while they paid $833.5 million in taxes. The industry has paid their way. These extra profits are not necessary for additional spending or needs at this time. Additionally, the current 7% severance tax on Wyoming surface coal is one of the highest in the nation. We know that the state of Wyoming is heavily dependent on the minerals industry, and this reduction in severance tax would complete a recommendation from Tax Reform 2000 and would be a step forward to addressing the unbalanced tax structure. It is equitable as severance tax reduction from 7% to 6.5% would improve competitiveness by moving closer to parity with natural gas, which is currently at a rate of 6%. It is stable as every dollar saved will help the Wyoming coal industry withstand the ongoing pressure from Washington that we heard is probably not going to stop until the earliest 2025. There's never been a better time for the Wyoming legislature to allow for companies to save more money, help stabilize cash flow, and limit exposure to an increasing difficult capital market for coal. The end result would allow the state more certainty of a stable revenue source. Of course, this is transparent as this tax is visible, accountable, and audible with the current system in place. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd stand for questions.
Any questions for Ashley, the WTA? Any questions? Any questions?
you.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for your input. Anyone else?
Thank you,
Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman. Shannon Anderson from Powder River Basin Resource Council. It probably comes as no surprise that we oppose the bill. This is my 15th year lobbying you all down here at the Wyoming Legislature. Over that time, we have opposed many attempts to reduce this coal severance tax. No legislature to date in my lobbying tenure has actually passed a coal severance tax break. And the reason you have not done that heretofore is exactly the conversation that you've been having today, which is, yes, coal production is declining. Yes, there are pressures on the industry, but the coal severance tax rate is not the determining factor in whether people get employed, whether we produce more coal out of the ground, and whether coal is competitive in an economic market for electricity. That is all based on natural gas prices, renewable portfolio standards, international commodity prices, and other factors outside of your control here in Wyoming. We would also kind of push back on the comparison to oil and gas. They're very different commodities. And it's really not an apples to apples comparison to think about having the same tax rate for coal as oil and gas. Oil and gas has very different end users, global market pressures, there's different energy content involved. It's transported differently. There's all kinds of different factors related to natural gas versus coal. And it just, again, doesn't make sense to kind of think about levelizing that tax. If we do that, let's do it for uranium. Let's bring that up to 6%. Other minerals that we have in the state have a lower tax rate because they're different than coal and oil and gas. So coal, again, has been at 7%. It's been at 7% for a very long time. And frankly, the tax rate isn't the determining factor on anything. I'd also like to just briefly touch on the whole regulatory pressure federal administration issue, which we really see as a red herring to the discussion before you today. Of note, because the black line excise tax did not get renewed last fall, there's actually been $25 million that industry has had as a windfall since January 1 of this year, because they haven't been paying into that tax, because the Build Back Better Act has been stalled in Congress, which had the renewal and reauthorization of the black lung excise tax. We also, just don't see a lot moving forward in Congress right now. I mean, clearly there would be maybe a regulatory move to increase potentially the federal royalty rate on coal, but without new leases, that doesn't really attach to anything in a meaningful way. So again, I think the federal regulatory pressures are just a red herring that I'd rather, I'd just caution you to kind of focus on what's in your control, and that's providing money to the Wyoming people. And this bill gives, $10 million away from the Wyoming people.
Mr. Chairman?
Question. Senator Bateman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Going back to your assertion that they're different fuels and they have different markets. Let's think about a power plant A that burns natural gas and power plant B that burns coal. They're both fuel. One pays a lot less in severance tax and has, on average, lower fixed costs than coal. That would be natural gas. Coal has high fixed costs and a higher severance tax rate. How is that fair?
And Mr. Chairman, Senator Beitman, I would just go back to my testimony on there's different transportation, there's different BTU content, there's different, they're just very different commodities. So yes, maybe natural gas and coal to some extent go both to the power sector. Natural gas is not exclusively for the power sector, like coal is. Again, different end users, different transportation, different BTU contents. They're very different commodities.
Follow up?
Not convincing her, Mr. Chairman.
Nope, sorry.
Yes, Senator Rothfuss.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I hadn't heard that the black lung excise tax had expired. When did that expire? And can you tell us a little more details? That was new to me.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, it was not reauthorized last fall, and so it expired at the beginning of the year.
Beginning of this year?
That's
Oh.
correct, Mr. Chairman.
Like January 1, it was.
Yes.
So
that's
like
correct.
January 1, it was no longer in effect? Okay.
That's correct.
I hadn't heard
Yeah.
that. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Other questions for Ms. Anderson? Other questions? Thank you, Shannon.
Yeah, thank you.
Anyone else would like to be grilled? I mean, testify. No? Is there anyone on the Zoom that would like to talk? No one in the room, no one's on Zoom. We'll close public testimony. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Move the bill.
Moved and seconded. Did you get those, Carla? Okay. All right. Anything you'd like to do to the bill? I'm going to go through this page by page. Page 1, page 2, page 3. Okay, let's do the roll call.
Senator Beitman,
Aye.
Senator Cooper. Senator Rothfuss,
No.
Senator Wasserberger,
Aye.
Chairman Anderson.
Aye.
4 ayes, 1 no, do pass House Bill 105.
House Bill 105 has passed the Senate Minerals Committee. Who's going to carry this on the floor? Is that you? Senator Beitman is going to carry that on the floor. Okay. Next bill to come before us. I don't have any more legislators to introduce, do I? One was in here, but he left. Oh, President Dockstetter came in. Oh, right back there. Welcome, President Dockstetter. Finally, we have a Senate member. We were kind of outnumbered by the House. All right, we have House Bill 131 to come before us. And before we start, I want you to know that we're going to quit at 2:20. And if we have to carry the bill over, we'll do that. Or maybe we can get done by that time. But we have a lot of people on the Zoom that want to speak to us, and a lot of people in the room, looks like, want to speak to us. So we'll get started. Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Don Burkhart. Members of the committee, House Bill 131, you've seen in a format at our last committee meeting for the Joint Minerals Committee. Bill is similar, but has some differences. And this bill really, bottom line, it's about jobs, keeping good high-tech jobs in Wyoming, keeping people employed, providing careers for people, and providing some vertical integration of our energy industry, hopefully in the future. I can note that jobs in the nuclear power industry pay about 10% more than comparable jobs in other power generation. The bill is intended to do three main things. Correct some issues that current legislation has with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission relative to the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's preemption when it comes to matters of nuclear power. Adjust our statutes to move from just small modular reactors into advanced reactors, a small modular reactor being a type of advanced reactor. And also addresses related issues to Senate File 159 and I believe it was House Bill 166 on the sale and purchase of coal-fired power plants that are closed prematurely or closed. So with that, I'll walk you through the bill. I'm working off of the engrossed copy. And as we go through, I will point out to you the changes or amendments made by the House and the bill. The easiest way to understand this bill is to first go to page 9, section 2, and look at the repealers. Wyoming Statute 3511, 1506E, I through V are repealed. 3511, 2101A, and 2101D, III, A through C are repealed. Those are the sections that cause problems or issues with the preemption with the NRC. So Article 15 originally addressed commercial storage of spent nuclear fuel rods. It was enacted in 1997 when the state was looking at getting a commercial storage facility in Wyoming. Subsequent to that, it was amended in 2017 to include mention of nuclear reactors, mainly because there was no place else to put it in statute. That was the only real place we could find to put it. So to address the preemption issues, we have to address some of the language that is in Article 15, specifically 1506E. But I do want to point out, this is not a nuclear waste storage bill. This bill deals with the generation of power from an advanced nuclear reactor. So E 1506E is partially repealed and partially amended. If you go down, and I'm on page 2 to subparagraph A, it mentions high-level radioactive waste or spent nuclear fuel. In Article 15, they tend to be a little synonymous. The only thing that would ever be stored at the advanced reactor being contemplated would be spent nuclear fuel. And it has, in addition to A, the facility is authorized if it meets the requirements on page 3. Facility received a license. One thing I'll point out is that TerraPower, who is doing the advanced reactor, is applying for a construction license and a separate operating license. You'll hear often that those are combined. They've elected it for their own business reasons to do a separate application for each. So C, report required under the following paragraphs. Operators in compliance with the paragraphs in the bottom sections. The operator submits that to DEQ, and it specifies the things that are required in those reports in A and B. And at line 19 and 20 on page 3, starting on line 19, and what number of those jobs will be filled by Wyoming residents was a committee amendment, standing committee amendment. Okay, and it requires that the reports be given to the commission, rather the Department of Environmental Quality, and that the reactor is permitted if it gets an NRC license. So, and I'm on page 4, line 17, Article 21. If you look, it changes the wording to advanced nuclear reactors, and some questions have been raised of, wait, that said small modulars before, and it isn't a change in the statutes the way we normally show those with a strike through. LSO tells me that changes in those titles do not require that we strike through and respell. So I will go with our attorney's position on that. So A, in Article 21, A is repealed, and that's where all the preemption issues tended to conflict. And I know the department is here and they can address some of those. It also changes the central focus from SMR, small modular reactors, to advanced reactors. B is amended to include it to the advanced reactors, and that they have to have an NRC license. Real easy. And the NRC does a tremendous job. Let me digress a little bit on permitting these. The permitting process is very arduous, very long, very involved, and includes U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Corps of Engineers, USGS, U.S. Geologic Survey, and starts pretty much with a risk assessment of the whole project. C remained in place. D is then modified to include advanced reactor and that. And if you remember in the committee bill, we had some definitions in there. Those are gone because it was very hard to define what they meant. One of them being these reactors are proliferation resistant. And that's a term that comes out of the Nuclear Energy Modernization and Innovation Act. But that's all it says. I know what proliferation resistant means. I believe Senator Rothfuss also understands those terms, but to explain them in a bill would probably, all those terms, quadruple the size of the bill. So what it says is an improvement over nuclear reactors placed in service before January 1, 2021, and also has a license by the NRC. C is slightly amended, E is slightly amended, and that was a cleanup. And to answer a lot of questions beforehand, Industrial Development Information and Siting Act still applies to the extent it doesn't duplicate or interfere with the NRC licensing. Again, our Department of Environmental Quality will kind of tag on with the NRC licensing. but won't be required to duplicate their work. There was a subparagraph I, which discussed ancillary facilities, and that was a removal by House Minerals on a standing committee amendment. They just felt it was redundant and didn't need to be in there. And I think Department of Environmental Quality agreed with them. Page 6, F. F is pretty much the exact wording in 1506E, and that was done just for consistency between the two articles. And if you go over to page 7, we've changed statutes to 37-133. And this is where we get into the issue of Bill 159 and 166 on preemption and offering for sale coal-fired power plants. And that J is added to make sure that a nuclear power plant doesn't have to comply with that a company doesn't have to sell it. I know that the PSC has a recommendation on that, and I do have some amendment recommendations that I'll talk about at the end of my presentation. 37-134 talks about the preemption issue that was in Bill 166. And if you go over to page 8, capital A says that retirement does not include conversion to a nuclear reactor or advanced reactor. Remember that if it's call a traditional reactor, what's known as a light water, pressurized water reactor, is not included in this. This is specific to advanced reactors. At the bottom of 837.3.117 conforms with one of the previous paragraphs. On page 9, under exemptions, the exemption was to exempt advanced reactors from the $5 megawatt tax that is currently in statute. The tax issue is an issue that needs to be considered, but to me is outside the realm of this bill. So the thought was to exempt the tax. The House, as a body on a third reading amendment, did not see it that way. So beginning on line 8, and that wording beginning July 1, 2035, it talks about shall only qualify for the exemption authorized if the reactor uses 80% of its uranium from domestic sources, United States sources. And I have a suggested amendment to that, and I'll just address that now, but give it to you in a minute in writing. Very difficult to do that right now, considering that while there are places being licensed to produce nuclear fuel for advanced reactors, none of them are in operation. So we've in effect said you got to comply with something that doesn't exist. And I have a suggested amendment for that. So section 2 is the repealer. Section 3 talks about rules, and the effective date is immediate so that the power companies can get on with their business. With that, Mr. Chairman, I have the amendments for you in writing. And if I get any of these wrong, some of them I will ask the Public Service Commission to come up and speak to them, if that's acceptable. And I'll wait till Darlene's had a chance to pass those out. So, Mr. Chairman, the first one is on page 7, line 14 through 16. The Public Service Commission did not feel that section was necessary or that paragraph was not necessary. The section deals with the purchase requirement of coal-fired plants. Legislative Service Office indicated they felt it was needed. That was their recommendation, legal recommendation, and I'll let the committee decide which way they want to go on that. I don't want to put the two groups into a jar and let them fight it out, so you get to make the decision. Then on page 8, line 6. The PSC recommended a change that after the words conversion to add or replaced with. They felt that just cleaned up the statute and made it more understandable. At the bottom of page 8, line 22, PSC recommended a technical change after the word to.
Representative Burkhart?
Yes,
I'm-
yes, Mr.
I'm
Chairman.
lost here. Page 8, line 6.
I'm sorry,
Oh, okay.
I apologize.
Yep, line 7. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I had to translate. They did this on the unengrossed copy and I had to make some
Okay.
translations here.
Okay, I get it.
So-
I get it. All right.
So after the words conversion to, they recommended to add or replacement with. Okay. Then on page 8, line 22, after the word to, they recommended insert an electric public utility that replaces a coal-fired electric generation facility with, so that it would read in total, the requirements of this section shall not apply to an electric public utility that replaces a coal-fired electric generation facility with an advanced nuclear reactor that is operating in the state of Wyoming in accordance with statute mentioned. Okay. Then, Mr. Chairman, on page 9, line 15, I would propose an amendment after the end of that sentence to read, this subsection shall only apply after advanced reactor fuel is produced by a commercial production facility within the United States. And the reason for that is it requires that we source 90% of the uranium for the fuel from the United States, but there is currently only one licensed facility that is getting up into production, a second on the way, I hope. But currently, there aren't any that do this. So this just says this goes into effect after they're able to produce the fuel. And the date of beginning, it's on line 8, beginning in July of 2035, all of that stayed in place. Mr. Chairman, that is a brief explanation of the bill and the suggested amendments. I know you have other testimony, and I will stand for any questions you might want to ask.
Questions for Representative Burkhart? Questions for Representative Burkhart? I have a question. Representative Burkhart, why do you want to leave that page 9, line 8 through 15 in and just amend it with your commercial production facility?
Mr. Chairman, there were a number of reasons. There were a number of amendments offered in the House which failed in the House. This amendment was adopted by the House by I wouldn't call it a narrow margin, but it wasn't very wide either. And with the current world situation, people wanted to encourage production of uranium in the United States. Frankly, most of it will come from Wyoming. We have the largest reserves in the United States, but nobody wanted to say Wyoming. I do have concerns with some of the wording and the way uranium fuel is produced. I'm not sure you can accurately determine that you have 80% coming from a particular source or 20% from another. Right now, almost all the yellowcake goes to a storage facility in Illinois where it's kept in drums, yellowcake, waiting extraction of the uranium, and they blend it. Some yellowcake is 40%, some 60%, maybe they need 47%, so they may blend it, and they take uranium from all over the world. There are numerous countries that mine uranium, and they could potentially have some from anywhere in the world. So unless you mined it now and put it in the system now and tracked it, I think it's very difficult to do the 80%. However, this was the direction the House wanted to go, and I will stand with the House on that.
Other questions for Representative Burkhart? Other questions? Hearing none. Thank you, Representative Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other legislators that would like to speak? Yeah. This is a tag team.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Pat Sweeney, House District 58. I just wanted you to know that there's great support for this, and I'm very supportive. And you will hear some naysayers probably on Monday, being we're running out of time, but I just wanted you to know there's great support. It's an all of the above energy policy. There's experts in the room that can answer a lot of the concerns that the House heard from certain individuals. But with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Heiner that it directly impacts his district.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Scott Heiner from House District 18, which encompasses Kemmer, North Evanston, and North Rock Springs in Sweetwater County. This would be built actually in my district, and my constituents are in favor of this, and I'll speak to that a little bit later. But as I researched this, I went back to the early 70s when the Jim Bridger power plant was built, one of the largest coal-fired power plants in the world at the time. And as no surprise to us here, there were some people that were not in favor of that. They were very much opposed to it. But throughout the years, as it got built and into operation, now the community is fighting to keep that plant running. And it's a vital part of the economy. And I say that because that's kind of what we're seeing here with this nuclear reactor. There were 4 locations that TerraPower had to choose from, and I saw some of the letters of support from each of the communities. They were very much vying for this opportunity in their own community, and it was very competitive. Fortunately, Kemmer was successful in that, and they ran a survey amongst the populace to see how supportive the community of Kemmer was. Many people, when they hear about all of the above energy policies, they say, yes, I'm in favor, I like it. I like wind power, but I don't want to see the windmills that are from my house. I like coal-fired power plant, but I don't want to be anywhere close to one. I like solar power, but I don't want to see them when I drive to work in the morning. But here with this community, they said that they were in favor of nuclear power, and they said, you can build it in our backyard. We want it in our backyard. There was 85% that were in favor of locating this nuclear power plant within just a couple of miles of town. Now, you've probably heard about the concern about storing waste on site. There's no other repository to store the waste because of political and other concerns. So they have to be stored on site. What kind of volume were we talking about, Mr. Chairman? If you take all of the nuclear waste produced in the United States over the past 70 years, it would fit on a football field. That's everything from these huge nuclear plants that have been operating for 70 years. So this smaller plant that consumes a lot more nuclear, that produces a smaller amount of nuclear waste, the amount of waste that will be produced is very, very small. I know it would fit within this room very easily. So until there's a permanent repository, there's no other option. As well as Representative Burkhart said, there's no other option right now to source the material to start up the reactor. 10X out of Russia is the only place you can buy this nuclear fuel. But not only the United States, but other countries within the world recognize the limitations of only having one source. And so TerraPower has put their money behind this development that we heard about from Senator Barrasso this morning, to have a development here in the United States for domestic supply. So TerraPower recognizes this. They do not want to purchase from Russia as well. They put money behind finding an alternative source. So they're very much committed to a domestic source of their fuel. So Chairman, members of the committee, appreciate your consideration of this. This is very vital to my community. 85% are in favor, and they said they want it built in their backyard. Thank you very much.
Questions for Representative Heiner? Questions for Representative Heiner? Hearing none, thank you, Representative Heiner, for being with us. I'd like to welcome Representative Gray. Oh, are you going to speak? Oh, yeah, sure. I got 2 minutes for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Got 2 minutes for you.
Yeah.
2:20, we're going to cut off.
Yeah, it's all good. Mr. Chairman, I just want to say one thing. I would like you to take a look at the amendment we considered in the House to say that the uranium would come from Wyoming and not the Russian Federation. It was a 25-34 vote, I believe. And on third reading, it was, I think, a 28-30 on second reading. A little bit different wording on second reading. It was about 2 votes away. So I just ask you, I think this is pivotal. I think that we need to put that in this bill. We're in a negotiation with the federal government. They want this to happen. And in my opinion, we put this in this bill. It'll make sure it happens. Senator Barrasso said today there's a bill that is potentially going through. I think we put it in this bill. I think it happens, and it's going to be Wyoming uranium at that site. So that's all I want to come down and say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Representative Gray. Questions for Representative Gray? Questions? Okay, we are going to continue this discussion. We'll leave public comment open, and we'll meet Monday at noon again, depending on what time we get out. But we'll leave House Bill 131 open for public discussion. Thank you. We are adjourned.